What's up, everyone? Friedemann Feddersen here from Holistic Songwriting. How are you guys doing? Hopefully, you're doing okay. Welcome to this live Q&A. Okay, so a lot of things have been happening this last week. As you may have noticed, if you've been following me on Facebook, I've been posting a lot about my board game, The Addiction Industry, which I'm now thinking of retitling to The Addiction Factory. So I'm still thinking about exactly how the game is going to look, but if you've been following me on social media, you know that my biggest challenge at the moment is figuring out how exactly the game is going to play. I mean, I had a whole game set up and already did some play testing, and it didn't work quite as well as I'd hoped. It felt a little bit long, it dragged a little bit. It was very realistic, which was nice, but at the same time, you know, sometimes too much realism isn't not necessarily a good thing. In other news, before we get into the actual Q&A, I have set up a merch shop because a lot of you have been asking about this. I wore a sweater, holistic songwriting sweater, a couple of weeks ago on the live Q&A. Some people have been asking about it. So so I thought, yeah, why not? Let's do this thing. So you can find a link to that in the description. I just set it up. All the prices are in euro, which is a little weird. I'm sorry, I can't really change that for some reason. So you can order some merch there, and it's international, so you can order from anywhere. The other news that I have is that since we have Black Friday week, we got a couple more days till the 30th, I believe. Yes, till the 30th. Until that date, you can still buy some of my courses for 30% off. And that includes all of my video courses. So those are usually my most expensive courses. So those are like the cheapest right now. So if you still want to get my video courses, you can do that also in the description. There's a link there. And with all that being said, let's look at what's going on in the chat. All right. So how's this looking? Hi from Stuttgart. All right, D. Brew is back. Good to see you back, man. Excited for this Q&A. Hello from Vienna. Good to hear from you, Masha. Denmark. All right. Aftab says, I fucking love your channel. Cool, man. Glad to hear it. So much to learn. What can we expect from this Q&A, says Dinesh Patnaik. Well, Dinesh, you can pretty much ask anything you want, and I will give my best to answer it. Oh, there's one more thing I want to mention before we jump into the actual Q&A, and that is the Super Chat. So if you have a really pressing question, you can use Super Chat. So that means you donate a little bit of money, and I will definitely answer your question, first of all. And secondly, the money that you spend through Super Chat will go into a fund from which I pay out. That basically is a fund that I use to give away courses during Christmas time. So I know this year is not going to be that much because I just started doing this 2 or 3 weeks ago. But next year, hopefully, the fund will be a little bit bigger, and I will be able to give away a lot of courses. So this year, I'm just going to give away a couple of courses, from my own money. But hopefully next year, the fund is going to grow a little bit more, so it's possible to fund it from this. And that's kind of the only way I'm getting paid for this Q&A. So if you want to donate a little bit for a good cause, I would really appreciate it. All right, so let's see. Here we go with the names again. Zanvazi Raka says, what advice do you have for foreigners writing lyrics in English? Well, I'm probably the right person to ask for this because I am German, and English is not my mother tongue. So I have to really learn English the proper way to write lyrics. And I think what I would say to you is just surround yourself with that language, man. I mean, I speak about, during my day, I speak about 60% English. Everything I consume is English. I set all of the websites that I'm at to English. All of my software I install in English, even if there is a German option. I watch a lot of TV series to learn, and the way I learn personally, I mean, this might be different for you, is I like to watch, or I used to back in the day. I don't do that so much anymore, but back then it was Family Guy for me. I was completely nuts about that series, so I would watch certain episodes multiple times. And what happens when you do that is you just start remembering certain lines. You just know what that character is going to say next, right? And so I once talked to someone who called this parrot English. Because essentially what you're doing is, well, you just kind of steal the sentence structure from those episodes or from those characters and just exchange the nouns or the adjectives, but you just know like this is how a proper sentence works, or this is how it's used in common English. It's not like how you would read it in a book. This is how people actually talk on the streets. And if I just exchange that noun, I got my own sentence made out of it, if that makes any sense. So again, watch a lot of series and rather go deep than go wide. It's always better to just focus on one or two series. And for me, Family Guy was great because it's all dubbed, so it's not actual actors. You don't have like on-set microphones, meaning the sound is very clear and crisp, so you can understand the English very, very well. And I just would just skip back if I didn't understand anything and just go on dict.cc, which is the site I use for translations, and would type in the word until I figured out the right spelling of it, until I figured out what the word was. And I listened to it over and over again until I figured out what that word was. And I wanted to understand every single word of them. So I guess that's what I would suggest to you. And good luck with that. All right, let's see. Can you suggest a book about music composition, says Lorenzo Cruciti. Cruciti? Sorry, I don't know if that's how your name is pronounced. A book about music composition. I mean, there's like the Samuel Adlers of the world, for orchestration, and what are they all called? Man, I read all of those a long, long time ago. Personally, I haven't really found one that I like that really, from my experience, gets what writing is like. For composition, there's a little bit more, but it's all very theory-based. And from what I've noticed, just from talking to professionals and from my own work, is and just looking at what professionals do in the studio, no one really cares that much about theory. Like that's highly overestimated, I think, especially in the teaching world of songwriting. So I think the best school really is to do it yourself and to listen to what other people are doing. And I personally really got a lot out of going to the conservatory, listening to other people's music who weren't at that point yet where it was really commercial. And because you hear a lot of things where you're like, oh, all right, I guess you shouldn't do that because that doesn't make a good song. So you learn from other people's mistakes. And if you're not going to conservatory yourself, the next best thing, I guess, is on this channel. Just look for Feedback Friday. It's one of the older playlists on this channel. This was actually one of the first things I did on this channel. And what I did was I just gave feedback to songs from songwriters like you and producers like you. So there you get a good chance of like hearing songs that aren't quite there yet, that maybe need a little bit of work. And then you get to hear my feedback on it and maybe see if you agree, if you disagree, and maybe you can learn something from it, because I always injected a little bit of teaching in there as well. All right. Nathan says, how important do you think it is to match your lyrics with the highs and lows in a melody? With the highs and lows, well, there is, I have two answers for that, really, depending on what you mean by highs and lows. Do you mean energy-wise, like what the addiction formula is talking about, basically? In a sense of, like, if the energy is really high in a song, the lyrics should reflect that, and if the energy is really low, the lyrics should reflect that as well. In that case, I would say yes. It should reflect that to a certain extent, even though, again, content in lyrics I don't find as important. Like if you just listen to the charts, the content it's more about like a quick, neat little, cute little idea usually. Like that's what lyrics are about these days. And it's not that that's easy to write, which many people think, but that's kind of what lyrics are about these days. It's about one interesting idea, and that is kind of like turned into a whole lyric. So in that case, yeah, you can do that, but there's a lot of artists who don't do that, who don't match energy levels of energy to of the song, of the energy levels of the song to the lyrics, or the other way around. I personally like to do that. Stuff like telling, smaller stories in the verses and having like a big message in the chorus is still a kind of songwriting trope that a lot of people teach in seminars and workshops and books. But lyrics are very massageable. Let's put it like that. You can kind of do a lot of things with lyrics, and it won't really matter, to be honest, unless you're writing some really, really bad lyrics. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, yes, you do absolutely, though, have to match the lyrics to the highs and lows in the melody, because when you're just saying a normal sentence, it already has a certain melody. It already has a certain melody, right? So in that way, yes, you absolutely do have to match the lyrics to the melody, because you don't want to get something that just sounds weird and out of place. And there are songs like that too that still were very successful, and obviously I can't think of any. Well, chandelier is like close. Chandelier is like not how you would say that word normally. That one is pretty okay though, but there's a couple of other examples of songs that were really famous that did that, where the word was really stretched when it shouldn't be, or there was a stress on a syllable that shouldn't be stressed. But yeah, so even don't worry about that too much, like not 100%, but if you can, try to make that work, because it sometimes can work against you in a song. All right. Aftab is asking about some gear for DJing. I'm not a DJ, so I can't help you with that. And it's to me, it's just long serial numbers. Sorry, Aftab. Any advice on how to get more exposure for my music, says Ryan Keevan. Yeah, make something that is worth exposing to the world. And this might seem like a really incredibly snide answer, but that's actually the truth. And any professional you ask will say that very thing to you. Just make something that is actually worth sharing, you know? And the most exposure these days with the internet is if people share your music, right? How did you find out about the last couple of bands you found out about? Probably from your friends, right? Someone recommended it to you. They say like, wow, this is really cool, weird, crazy, emotional. This made me feel this, you know? That's how you kind of learn about new bands usually. And the other way you learned about it is probably if you just like clicked on something that was recommended to you on YouTube. And why were you recommended that? Well, because it got a lot of clicks, it got a lot of traffic and engagement, meaning a lot of people really like that stuff. So that's really the primary way to get fans, is to make something that is worth sharing, that is really, really fantastic and great. And that seems like an obvious thing to do, but a lot of music that I hear is just not there. I mean, some of it is like really well done, it's really well made, and some of it even has heart. But especially in the beginning, if you're trying to like get noticed, you really want to do something that people will notice, right? It seems self-evident, but still, as I said, a lot of people don't seem to do that. Okay, all right, it jumped again. Let's see. What's that supposed to mean? Kid Monster says, how do you often to feel the melody? How often do you feel the melody? I don't understand, Kid Monster, so if you want to write that question again. All right. MOSD says, do you have any advice on writing lyrics that perfectly convey emotion and makes people feel it? I'm always a big defender of lyrics that have examples that are very specific, but that everyone can kind of relate to. And for that, I like to really look at stand-up comedians, because they're really the best at figuring out like these situational things that all of us kind of do, and we all think we're so special for doing them, but in reality, that's really kind of what everyone's doing, you know? Stuff like you get out of the train and you walk a couple of meters and you're like, oh shit, I needed to go that way. And so you're like, just looking around as if you like, oh, just remembered something, and you just like acting this whole thing out for people that are not seeing what you're doing anyways, and you just like walk back as if you forgot something or something when you were just stupid. Stuff like that, you know? If you can fit, like that was a comedy bit, obviously, but if you can find ideas like that have that certain truth to them, that feel real enough to someone, that when you say them, someone is going to go like, ooh, that feels like something I own, that I do personally, like no one else does that. That's something that's speaking to me, right? If you can do something like that, if you have lines that speak to people personally in that way, I think that's already a really good way to do that. Okay, Kyle Anderson says, any advice on how to choose the right transposition/key of a song? Well, if the main thing that that matters to me is like just the vocals. Anything else, I mean, usually that doesn't really matter. If it's just an instrumental track, or if I'm writing it for myself, usually the key's going to be fine from the get-go anyways. But if I'm writing for another artist, if we have to record vocals, I'll typically just try out what the highest notes are that she can sing. And if it's a really powerful song, I'll make sure that those high notes are in the song somewhere. Because I want to hear all her range, and if it's something really powerful, I want her to like stretch a little bit to like get to those high notes. I'm not necessarily saying like you want to reach the very highest notes in her range. You just want to get the highest notes that still sound good and that sound like she conveys the message of the song with those notes. But other than that, I don't really think about the key of a song too much. If I'm writing orchestral music, that's a completely different thing. Or if I'm writing for an actual band, so with actual instruments, people that actually have to play it, I'll try to write for something that doesn't have too many sharps or flats. But other than that, I don't really think about that too much. Shatumi Lelwala. Oh, wow. This is a really exotic name. And a beautiful one, I'm sure, but I can't pronounce it. Sorry. Are there any artists that you think are underappreciated? Tons. For most of them, I kind of understand why they weren't more famous. There's some artists where I'm still like wondering like how that song was never a hit. There was mostly like those artists that I listen to are mostly alternative artists, and so they have their small little niches and they're niche famous. So it doesn't really matter too much. But there's still some songs where I'm like, wow, this could be a really great pop song and a hit, and why wasn't it? There was one called Sex is Keeping Us Together by Sierra Swan is her name. And I really love that song. I've showed it to a couple of people and they didn't love it as much as I do. I totally dig that song though. And that was a song that I thought that was totally underappreciated. I have her album too, and there were some clunkers on there as well, unfortunately, and some stuff that wasn't as strong and some stuff that could have been simplified for sure. It's an interesting album to listen to for that reason, because you hear like it's just tiny little details that could have been changed just so slightly. But then it could have been some really great songs. So it's a really interesting album to listen to. Again, that's Sierra Swan, and I think what was the album called again? Well, it was the one that had Copper Red on it, and I think Sex is Keeping Us Together was a different one. But anyways, so that would be an artist that I think is underappreciated. And there's plenty of others, but I will make a video before this year ends about my favorite songs of 2017, and I will mention tons of artists that you've probably never heard of, because the video is actually going to be called, or the podcast is going to be called, my top 50 artists that you've never heard of, or something like that. I still have to think of a good title. All right. So, MS Shut Up and Dance, MSU and D, which is or Miss Shut Up and Dance, MSU and D, really long name, says, so great to have found your channel. Glad to hear that. My question is, would I be better spending the time to learn an instrument or get a computer program like GarageBand to try and find ideas for songwriting? Truth be told, probably both. If you're really short on time, I think an instrument is more valuable because, first of all, it has more of for me, it's a sentimental value as well. I like my guitar. I like playing guitar. I like the idea of being able to just sit in a room without any electronics around me and being able to write music. I like that. On the other hand side, I think you learn some valuable things for guitar. If you just have an instrument and your guitar and your vocals to write a song, you have to get creative. And I think that's great. Limitation can be really, really helpful. And also just being able to learn an instrument, I think, is really cool. And, there's all these studies that it makes you smarter and all that stuff. I think that should be self-evident. But, I think it's just fun. As a first instrument, I would probably suggest piano or guitar, just because they're, harmony instruments. So they're probably the most useful if you ever want to get into songwriting. But I'm a guitarist myself, so that was why I was talking about guitar. But piano is a great instrument as well. It's not as you can't do as many creative things with it as with guitar. On guitar, you can do a lot of things with the strings, because just the physical way that the instrument is built allows for a lot of interesting things. But on a piano, it's really handy to be a good piano player, which I'm not, unfortunately, because once you go to a DAW, to the computer, to write music, MIDI keyboards are all over the place. So it's just an easy way to record MIDI that way. So both have their ups and downs. If I could do it again, I would probably go for piano, though. Even though our guitar has the whole rock thing built around it. I'm not sure. Anyways. D. Brew says, has food or what you eat in general any influence on music composing? That's an interesting question because it's a holistic question. So this is why I'm answering this one. I like this one. It does not have a direct influence on what I'm composing, I don't think. But I think nutrition is a really important factor for any professional. Really, I believe that. And, I'm always like trying to stay low on carbs. And I eat some carbs. It's not like I'm abstinent or anything like that. But I just try to like live a healthy, nutritious life in a way. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's kind of all I want to say about that. But just eat healthy, just don't eat a lot of junk food all the time. Just try to like, eat some proteins and do some sports, obviously. That stuff is just kind of important if you want to keep a fresh mind in general. All right. Masha says, producing, when is a song ready? I mean, ready. I tend to work on my songs for weeks, on my music for weeks, thinking this might sound better, I'll figure it out. Do you have some sort of deadline for your songs? Yes, I always do. So in the beginning, it's good that you don't have a deadline, and I'm glad that you are working on your songs weeks and weeks, because that's how you learn, ultimately. It's how you figure out all these little things that you shouldn't be doing, and that don't really shape your personal sound. So in the beginning, it's great that you're writing for a really long time. But after a couple of years, and I think it took me like 4 or 5 years or so, then I just slowly started adding deadlines to my own work. And now I obviously have external deadlines from artists that I'm writing for and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I only have deadlines, which means like even if I don't want to write, I kind of have to write sometimes. And that's a different kind of problem. But yeah, so deadlines definitely help with productivity. And there's it's called, man, with the names today, it's called Parkinson's Law. You can look it up. It's a really interesting phenomenon. And it means basically that you spend less time, like you finish products quicker if you allot less time to them. So that's Parkinson's Law, like the sickness. So go check that out. Benjamin Möller-Jensen says, I think my own music is shit, but other people like it. I feel like the shit feeling is holding me back. So what can I do to find myself in music? I guess that's one of the problems. Well, did you hate your music when you wrote it, or did you like it and only develop that hate relationship with it after you put it out and after a couple of months or years? Because if you're not having fun writing something, why would you release it? Is my thinking behind it. Like, obviously, as any songwriter will tell you, you have songs that you wrote a couple of years ago that you listen back to now, and you're like, oh wow, why did I ever release that? That was like nowhere near ready. And sometimes I have projects that I just do half-assedly. I'll admit that, because I'm focusing on the things that are important. And there's some projects where the music just isn't that important. Like if I'm writing for, there's certain documentaries that I write for that I do a little bit half-assedly, and I'm still it's good, it's all right. And in the film you won't notice because the focus is not on the music. But I just rather put my focus on things that are important to me, that I think are really going to make a difference, where the music, having a big step in production quality is going to make a difference as well. But yeah, I mean, I think you should have fun writing your music, and I think you should like your music when you release it, or at least when you write it. Sometimes the producing and the mixing can take so long that you kind of grow tired of your own songs, and that can happen. You just kind of have to get through that. But yeah, I mean, if you don't like your songs, why are you releasing them? Why are you showing them to people? And if you don't like your songs, though, that's there's a start. Like you're like, okay, the next question you should ask yourself is, what do I not like about it, and what can I change to make this stuff better? So that can be a good thing. Just don't be overly negative. As long as you're having fun, that's the most important thing. As long as you're enjoying writing, then I think having a little bit of self-criticism isn't too much of a bad thing. All right. Prahlad says, why do people hate Nickelback? I'm not going to answer that. And Joe Dexter says, I would also like to know why people hate Nickelback. That's hilarious. Actually, I've seen Nickelback live once, mostly because of the opener, not really because of them. Because I'm not the biggest fan of them either, to be honest. And I don't know why. It's just not my thing. It seems to me it always felt a little bit shallow. But like they had plenty of fans that really love their music, so they're doing something right for sure. But that gig that I saw with them, which was after they had broken up for like a year or 2 years, we hadn't heard from them for a really long time, and then they had like a reunion tour basically, and it was the second gig they played after that really long break, and it was the best gig that I've ever seen, and I'm not kidding you. Not so much because of the music, because, as I said, I'm not really a big fan, but just the announcements between the songs. Like sometimes they were just talking for 10 minutes, and I loved it because they were hilarious. They were obviously in a really good mood to be back, and it was absolutely amazing. It was the best concert I've ever seen. Really, just the best mood at a concert ever. So I later read a review of it that he was talking too much, but I just totally loved that actually. All right. Let's see. Assad Shezed says, are melodies made from scales, then matched with lyrics, or the other way around? By the way, hi, I love these live sessions, and when is your merch coming? The merch is already there, actually. I'm not sure if you can see the description of this video, but if you can, like it should be below this video. Maybe it's not because it's live, but maybe you have to wait until this video goes, like, once this session is over, you should be able to see it at least. And there's the link for the shop. So it should say below this video, the official Holistic Songwriting merch shop. And then it gives you the link to check out the merch. But that's a really common question I get a lot, is basically melody or lyrics first. But your question is a little bit different because you're saying, are melodies made from scales, then matched with lyrics, or the other way around? Which assumes that melodies are always made with a theoretical knowledge of scales in the background, which is not really the case. Like, I've really just, I know what I'm doing. Like, I could tell you what I'm doing if I looked at my melodies, but while I'm writing my melodies, I'm not really thinking like, okay, now I'm going to the third, and now I'm going to the 4, 5, going back to the third, and then 1. That's not really what I'm thinking about. I'm doing that pretty much after the fact. When I'm writing, I'm pretty much just writing whatever, like I'm singing whatever feels good to me, And sometimes I'll change things based on the theory, but that's very rare actually. Most of the time it's just whatever comes into my head, like whatever sounds good to me at that very particular moment. So keep the scales out of it a little bit, That's interesting. It's interesting for analysis, but not necessarily for creating melodies. And as for your other question, melodies or lyrics first, I've answered this question a number of times already, unfortunately. So I'm going to give you a very short answer today. But my answer is, for me personally, it's melody first and then lyrics. There's people who like to do the other way around, but for me, that's the way I do it. And I've given this, longer answers in other videos, so maybe check those out if you are interested in a longer answer. Okay, I'm buffering a lot, says Twigger Learner, apparently. All right. Okay. How do you go about doing a key change mid-song, says Tech Rose. I guess with like I was going to say secondary dominant, but that's kind of a classical move. I guess the best way to do it that sounds kind of modern is with a pivot chord. And a pivot chord basically means that, so we're talking about 3 chords, right? So the third chord is supposed to be in a new key. So the first chord is from your old key, and the middle chord is a key that belongs to both keys, right? So for example, if I want to go from C major to F major, I might have the first chord might be an A minor, then it's a C major, and then it's F major, because C major exists in C major, and it also exists in F major, where it's the dominant chord. So that's a really nice way of doing things. Oh, cool. We just got a little donation from Kai Ellis. For $2. Thank you very much, Kai. I really appreciate it. And he asks, have you heard the new Pink album, Blew Me Away? I haven't heard it. When did it come out? Maybe we can do a podcast on it or something like that. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm excited to check it out because I really like Pink, and I have a couple of her albums actually. All right. B Beats says, after years of making music, do you have that kind of high frequency noise always in your ears? Tinnitus? Tinnitus? Is that how you pronounce it? I have no idea. If yes, how do you deal with it? Some producers say you got to live with it. Thanks. Fortunately, I don't, because I was always very, very careful with my ears. And from a very early age, like 15 years old, I always had earplugs and brought them to every concert that I went to. Still, every concert that I go to, if I don't have my earplugs, I'm just going to use like in-ear headphones. Because those keep the sound out pretty well as well. Like the ones that go deep, not just like the plastic ones. So I've always protected my ears from the start. So thankfully, I don't have tinnitus, if that's how you pronounce it. But what I hear from some producers that do have tinnitus is that they sometimes use it to essentially create absolute hearing. Because the way they use it is they just know what they figure out what their pitch is, and so they're like, oh, that's an A, right? And so if they hear another note, they just compare it with that tinnitus note, and they'll know what that other note is. So that can help them figure out the key a song is in or something like that. It's kind of useful. I personally think it's not really that amazing because, hearing music relatively is so much more important than absolutely. Like, what good does it do if you know that's a C? I think it's much more important that you know, like, that's the third of the scale in that song. You don't know what the scale is, what the key is of that song, but you know, like, what that note is doing functionally. But still, like, when I was 18, I kind of wished I had tinnitus so I could hear songs absolutely, but now I don't so much anymore. All right. Assad Shezet says, what gives goosebumps to people from music? Is there a specific thing? Yes, I think there's a bunch of things actually you can do to give people goosebumps, and lyrics obviously are really important. There's stuff like strings, there's certain instruments like cymbal rolls, like can get really emotional. There's stuff like that. I always liked something where doing something like a lot of production stuff, so for the producers out there, you might try something like putting, having the vocals kind of in the back of the arrangement, like a little bit, so not like a really close-up vocal, and then in some portion of the song, so typically the bridge is a good moment for that, you bring the vocals very, very close and have that really warm sound and something really close by, and that gives me goosebumps all the time, something like that. I like songs that build for a really long time and then have like this really like washed out, like huge thing coming at the end of them. Thinking of, what's that song again? Spanish Sahara by Foals. Foals. Spanish Sahara is the song. That song is from that video game, Life is Strange. That really blew me away. Like, that's one of those, certain goosebump moments for me every time I listen to it. EA Rocket says, is the hook checklist in your master files bundle? I believe it is not. I believe the master files bundle is only the master files. Sorry. Favorite Taylor Swift song, says Anag Mamadapur. I said that in the podcast, but I can't remember it now, unfortunately, because I basically analyzed the whole album in a couple of hours, and I don't remember all the names. But from the new album, I really like I think it was the second to last or third to last song on that album. I think it's the second to last. This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things. That's what it's called. That's the one I like best from the new album. I do like from 1989, I like Style a lot. I think Style was probably my favorite. Yeah. So. Cool. Assad Shazed says saxophone or trumpet. Trumpet is a very difficult instrument, so I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't played any woodwinds or brass instruments before. Trumpet is very, very difficult. I can't at all play trumpet. I can play a little bit of saxophone, not well at all, but I can play it a little bit, and I know where all the keys are and how to produce different notes. And saxophone is definitely a lot easier. How was that again with saxophone? I think a tenor saxophone is best for beginners. Or was it even alto sax? I'm not sure anymore. Sorry. So you should probably ask someone who actually plays the instrument. But from my experience, from talking to trumpet players and saxophone players, trumpet is a very challenging instrument, especially because the muscles in your lips you lose them so quickly. So trumpet players have to honestly rehearse every day for at least half an hour to keep those muscles in the lip area. And that's what makes that such a challenging instrument. Whereas saxophone, you can have that too, but not as much. You don't need that many muscles. With trumpet, you need a lot of tension here. I actually was talking to, when I was in LA, I met a trumpet player there who, when he was a kid, like a teenager, he was able to hit some extremely high notes on a trumpet, like, C 2 octaves above high C, which is an extremely high note to play for trumpet. Like safe writing for trumpet, I believe, goes up to high C. Or high E sometimes. You can write up to high E. So that's C above middle C. And he could play 2 octaves above that. So that's crazy, crazy high. And I went to record with him something there, and he hadn't played in years. And he told me, like, we probably shouldn't be doing this. And I said, like, oh, yeah, but I really need this trumpet track recorded. Sorry. And it was like he couldn't even hit high C anymore, So not saying like he's a bad player or a bad person. Like, I really highly appreciate that he recorded with me. But it's just like you lose that. You have to practice every day, basically, or at least every week to not lose those muscles. So that's why I would say go with saxophone probably. It's probably the easier instrument. And also it's a very expressive instrument. And there's a lot of cool bands that use it. Like what's it called? The something quartet. Oh man, that doesn't narrow it down at all, does it? The Portico Quartet. That's what it's called. Portico. Portico. Portico Quartet. Really love what they're doing. Colin Farrell. Oh, I didn't know we had celebrities here. Hello, Colin. Big fan. What do you think of modern German language pop music as compared to international pop music? It's interesting. It's really, really fascinating how German pop music is different from American pop music. And you would think like pop should be all, the same all around the world. It really is not. Like German pop music is certainly very, very different. I believe what happens is like just historically, Germany was really big in the, Renaissance and, that time period with like Mozart and later Beethoven and Chopin, not Chopin, but like Europe was really big in like the Western creation of that Western sound. So the classical music is what I'm trying to say. And so we have created that sound, and we still have that in Germany. What we don't have is what the Americans have, is the South American sound or the African rhythms, right? Like American music is way groovier. Drums play a really important role. It's one of my 3 pillars of hit songwriting. Actually, I've talked about that in videos before, which are hook, lyricless storytelling, which is what I talk about in the addiction formula, and groove. Groove is the 3rd pillar of hit songwriting. So if you're writing for in the States or South America, obviously, their groove even plays a bigger part. But groove is a really important part of American pop music, and it doesn't play such a big role in German pop music. Here, we have a lot of 4 on the floor, like very simple stuff. It's not like this really groovy, sexy kind of music. It's way simpler, way, way, way simpler. And I personally am not such a big fan. Some of it I like, but I personally prefer American music. Maybe because I'm a dancer. Like I dance with my girlfriend, and German music just isn't as fun to dance to. Okay, Markus Schukowski asks in German when to introduce the vocals on, like he's asking in German, I'm trying to translate here freely. He's asking whether to bring the vocals in on the 1 of the measure or later or earlier. That really depends on what you're trying to do, Marcus. So if you want to have like a really relaxed kind of feel, it's usually better to start a little bit later. And I love starting vocal lines a little bit later, not like on the 1. The 1 is very prominent, very like on top, right? It's very on the nose as well. It's probably my least favorite way to start a melody is just on the 1. I like to have a little bit of pre-roll or to come in a little bit later. Probably the one that has the most energy for sure is having a little bit of pre-roll, having to have that melody build, like this is why we can have nice, and then like that's where the measure starts, right? Things that's how that line goes on. But anyways, like those are really the 3 options that you have. You either start on top, which is can work, but it's a little bit boring. It's a little bit on the nose, as I said. Starting a little bit early has the most excitement, is the tensest as well, as I say in the addiction formula as well. That has a little bit more details about when to start your melody within the bar. And if you start late, that just makes the whole thing a little bit more relaxed, as I discussed in the Drake video as well, where like Drake is really famous for or does that a lot. He's not really famous for it. I guess that's just something I found out in my video. Is he just likes to start after the downbeat. So you have the downbeat, the one, and then he starts, right? So he skips the downbeat a lot in his raps, and it has a more relaxed feel. It lets the music speak a little bit more. Twigger Learner says, can I ask what live chat software you're using, brother? I am using OBS, which is free software. Thank you very much. Preston TV says, I write raps. I try to write one verse a day for practice. Is this good, or should I practice writing my lyrics more often? Dude, once a day is perfectly fine. Like, that's something to be actually really proud of. And I'm sure you just posted that to just brag a little bit, but that's fine. Mr. Rock and Roll 12345 says, can rock music still be in the top 10, or has it become irrelevant in popular culture like jazz? It definitely hasn't become irrelevant. The alternative market is doing really, really well. It's just not in the pop charts, like meaning rock music hasn't figured out a way to be really danceable. Like, it doesn't really work in clubs at the moment, which, like, just electronic music is just tailored to clubs, right? And having a raw rock band has a lot of energy, but it's just a different kind of energy. It's the sound is different. I'm sure you know what I mean. But I'm sure we'll get to that point where rock music will come into pop music and will create some kind of hybrid sound that kind of does sound like rock, but also has that deep clubhouse sound that we're used to. And I mean, the first song that we heard just recently was what's it called? More Than You Know by something. More Than You Know is the song, and that kind of starts with like a Nirvana kind of riff. And so I think rock still is viable. We're seeing more and more guitar in the last couple of years in pop songs. Mostly clean, not a lot of distorted guitar, but I can see that coming back. Especially if you're thinking about how certain times are coming back. We already went through the 70s and 80s. Like, no, sometime in the next couple of years, it should be theoretically time for the 90s, right? And the 90s were grunge, Nirvana. So potentially there's still something there that could be used for commercial music. All right. Rafo says, would you say 3 to 6 months to write a song is a long time? I cannot do it in less time, and I think it is because of my short knowledge. That really highly depends on the song. I have written on songs for that long, but it's very rare now at this point in time. And a lot of what I learned when I was in LA, watching a professional producer work, was just like working fast. And a lot of it had really to do with shortcuts on the keyboard, just being able to like output your stuff quicker into the computer, like having that connection with the computer. Like, it almost feels like it's an extension of yourself. You want to get to that point for sure. But then, 3 to 6 months is very long. Like, you're never going to meet any deadline in this industry, professional deadline in this industry, if you write like that. If you're just writing for yourself, that's totally fine, of course. But personally, I find like after even after a couple of weeks, a song can really get on my nerves, So I want to write songs rather quickly and have someone else do like the mastering or mixing for it, so I don't have to listen to it a million times, because I can get really tired of my own songs. So I try to keep my deadlines short. But as I said before, in the beginning, you want to have no deadlines. You just want to work for as long as you want, because you want to learn all those mistakes that you can make, and you just want to learn like, oh, next time I shouldn't be doing this, right? It's kind of the purpose of writing music in the beginning. Asad Shazed says, have you ever released your own music or your own song or album? I have, back in the day when I was 17 or so, or 18 maybe. I released a little EP, I guess you could call it, of 4 songs called Resilience, which I'm not very proud of. There's some bits on there that I still think are cool, but it's definitely a very amateur album. But that was the last time I really released something. I mean, I've released like songs since then, like once every 4 or 5 years or so. I've released a Christmas song, which I still really like. You'll Never Guess, which I'm sure I'm gonna post this Christmas as well. And a song here and there. Like you can find a song called "To My Younger Self" on my other YouTube channel, like my private YouTube channel, which I don't use anymore. It's called "To My Younger Self," and just type in my name, Friedemann Findeisen. So that song I really like, actually. I don't like the production. It's an old production, but I do really like that song. And even then, I was already analyzing it. So that video also has some analysis of that song. Not all of it is correct, unfortunately, but yeah. EA Rocket says, what is your impression of the Tune Tracks, Easy Keys, and Easy Drummer software programs? I have not worked with Easy Keys, but I do know Easy Drummer. And yeah, I think it's good. It's a little dated at this point, just slightly. I mean, did they have a new release? I'm not sure. They updated it. But Easy Drummer's been around for a really long time. So there's some more recent stuff, I'm sure, that sounds just as good or better. But Easy Drummer is good. I also like Studio Drummer from Native Instruments. Those are kind of like the standards. And Steven Slate drums, of course. There's the one that the Paramore producer made, which I really like. That's a really cool one. There's a bunch of them. I also have BFD2. I'm not sure that there's probably a BFD3 or 4 by now, which I never really liked because it was so heavy on CPU. But yeah, Easy Drummer, it's easy, as the name says, right? And for all of you that haven't read the comment, it's spelled E-Z, E-Z, like the two letters, right? E-Z Drummer. All right. What is the best way to promote your music, says Cannery? It's if you have in the beginning, it's all about that first release that you make, right? If you have something that you're really proud of, which your first song should absolutely be, like you should release your best thing first, because you don't want to annoy anyone with bad songs. You only want to put out the very, very best stuff in the beginning. But later on, if you have a fan base, you can put out something good just to keep them going until they wait till your next big, really cool release, right? That's when you release like B-sides or album tracks that didn't make it as a single that are still very good, but not like super, super high quality, like stuff that's really, really out there. But as your first track, you definitely want to make something really, really cool. And the best thing to do is just really like tell all your friends to listen to it. Don't just tell them, but like ask them to listen to it and ask them what they think. And if you're lucky, they'll share it, they'll like it, and stuff like that. And that's usually how the first kind of barrier is broken through. Like if you just kind of want people to share it and share it with their friends, and maybe those friends will share it again if your stuff is really good. And if it really is good, people do share it. That really does work. That's the magic of the internet, as I found out with my YouTube videos as well. So that's a big one. If you're really proud of it, if you have something coming, you might also consider sending it to reviewers. I found that doesn't really make that much of a difference because people don't really listen that much to reviewers. Reviewers don't have that much power over whether a song is successful or not. But it can help you get a little bit more traffic. You can try something I like to do a lot when I advise people on releasing stuff is to release your song in multiple variations. So not just release the music video and you're done. No, release an acoustic version. Release a live version, how you're playing it live. Release remixes. Maybe someone else did a remix for you, Stuff that you can do fairly quickly. Release a lyric video, stuff so people can, or making off video and the song is playing in the background. It's just ways to make people hear your song over and over again, right? And so maybe after a while they really get used to it enough to actually like it and buy it, or recommend it to a friend at least. So that's what I would recommend. Ahmed says, what do you think? Is singing a talent or skill? Please explain. This is such a different question. This is such a difficult question because I'm really talent is such a vague term and people define it in so many different ways. And this is how your brain this is your brain on music. Covers talent a lot, and there's Good to Great, which covers talent, and it's a really fascinating subject. If you want to read those books, those are really, I highly recommend those books. And wait, or was it Outliers? It might have been Outliers instead of Good to Great that covers talents. Anyways, like the general gist of it is, from what I understand, talent. And I understand this is not your question, but I have a point to make with this. So there was this in Outliers. The author describes, Malcolm Gladwell, I believe is his name, describes that a lot of researchers figured out that a lot of the hockey players in the really big league teams, were born in the same month. And I believe it was towards the beginning of the year, like January or February, or they had the same star sign or something like that, the same sign. And they thought, like, how can that be? Is that like horoscope? Like, what's that all about? And they figured out that the reason for that is that if you're born in the early months of the year, then you don't go to school as early as the other kids. Like, you have to wait another year before you go to school because you're just a little bit too young for school at that point. And by the point you get to school, you are just a little bit older than everyone else, meaning physically you're also a little bit more advanced and your mind is a little bit more advanced. And that really helps you on the hockey field, right? If you have hockey in school or sports in school, then your trainer is going to notice that and tell you, wow, you're really good at that. You should be doing that more often. And we all love to hear, get recognition. We love to hear that stuff. So usually we put more work into that. And that kind of, turns into an upward spiral. And by the end of it, we might be a professional hockey player. So that's how I see talent. And I believe that's how talent truly works. And it's all about like what you like doing. And if you love doing something, you just get better at it. That's how I see talent. So I don't really believe there is something like you're born as a singer. There are people, though, and I also have to admit that really aren't great singers, even though they practice all the time. And there's also people who just like don't practice and they're really good. And yeah, there's always people who will say like, oh, those people actually practice. They're just too proud to admit that they practice and they just practice in secrecy. But that's not really true. There's just people who can really sing better than others. So it's not really fair. The thing is, it doesn't really matter if you're a singer. Does it matter? Like, I mean, you should be doing this for fun. Like, you shouldn't be doing it to just get better than everyone else. It's not a competition, man. It's about making something that's great, right? And that doesn't have to be super skillful. Like, you don't have to be super great at technique to be a great singer. Keith Richards wasn't a great singer, right? Or, Kurt Cobain wasn't a great singer, but they had the emotion, they had a message that they wanted to convey to an audience, and that really worked for them. So don't worry about that too much if that is keeping you from becoming a better singer. So just, hopefully that answered your question somehow. I'm getting really hoarse, unfortunately. And also we have 5 more minutes to go, so I'm going to go on to the last couple of questions. Oh, it jumped again. Anna says, I really love Taylor Back in her country pop days. Red Till Date is my most favorite album. I guess she went mainstream with 1989 and Reputation. Do you think pop will die like jazz or hip hop? No, because pop, it's a definition thing, right? Pop like today will die. Like the sound that pop has just today, like at this very moment, will certainly die. But the definition of pop is just going to change. Like pop in the 90s sounded very different than pop sounds today, right? Or pop sounded in the 60s even, If you look at the 60s, pop was just this completely different thing. So just the definition of what that style is just changed. Because there's never like really just one big change and all of a sudden everyone just does this other thing. It's mostly like small little changes, that keep changing the pop definition. All right. Okay, we're going to get to the last 2 questions now. Cool. Ashley Prince Washington says, hi Ashley, what DAW would you consider using? I use Logic Pro X, like that's my main DAW, but I'm currently working myself through Ableton Live, which I have this thing over here for, the push. And the way I do that is I just got myself an all-year access ticket to Groove 3, which is my favorite site for learning how to produce. And I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just really think they're doing a really great job, and I'm really enjoying their video series. It's a little slow for me because I already know how to, work a DAW. It's all in the details though, so I have to watch all of those videos. But it's still very, very good and very thorough. Groove 3. So the word groove and then the number 3.com it's really worth the money. And since they have a Black Friday kind of action where everything is whatever 30% off. I think it's just $99 for an all-year access ticket, and that's so worth it because they have so much stuff on their website. It's unbelievable. It's a really crazy good deal. So if you're thinking about becoming a producer, you could either wait for my course, which is going to release next year, or you should just totally go to Groove 3, and I love their stuff. It's not from a perspective of a songwriter. That's what my course is going to be about, but it is from the perspective of a producer, so it's a little bit more technical, so be warned. But it is excellent. It's really, really good. All right. What does your tattoo on your arm say? That's the first verse of Imagine by John Lennon. So it's imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. That's what that says. Sam Buzz says, what to do if I got a poor mic recording system? My phone, actually. Well, you have to kind of figure out a way how to use that musically, right? Just put it in there somehow, pretending like that's how you envisioned it, is probably the best thing you can do. Otherwise, just buy yourself a microphone. Like, mics are really not that expensive. Like, if you go for, what's that mic called again? Wait, let me check that out for you. Probably one of the cheapest mics you can get. I mean, this one here, Blue Microphone, it's just $100 and you can plug it right into your computer via USB, so you don't need any audio interface. So that's pretty damn fantastic in my book. Wait, where is it? Oh man, wish I could remember what that was called. It's Naver, so Neewer. It's like a really popular mic. Like, I'm sure you can find it on Amazon. I think it's like $30, $40, so it's crazy cheap. And it's a condenser. And I'm not sure if it doesn't work with USB, so you need an audio interface as well. So probably this is still your cheapest option. But yeah, so I would really recommend you get yourself like a condenser microphone. And don't get yourself a dynamic microphone, really get yourself a condenser microphone. But if you have to record on your phone, then what I would recommend is just turn it into something that sounds like you wanted it exactly that way. So create a new style of music that has these really low-cut vocals, I guess. All right, last question. Which artist of current pop generation will be the Beatles of our generation? Interesting. I don't think there is gonna be any. I mean, the Beatles were so unique and so special. I don't think anything's really ever gonna replace them. There's not really any. I mean, there's definitely writers out there that are really very good. Like Bruno Mars is a fantastic writer and composer. Like, there's no question about that. Just fantastic musician overall. But the Beatles were really like groundbreakingly different. Like, they did some things that just stood out above everyone else at that time. And that was a really highly creative time. So that really meant something. So I don't think there's ever going to be another Beatles band. I mean, there's Tame Impala, which kind of sound a little bit like the Beatles, and they have a really cool sound. There's a lot of alternative bands that do similar things, but having a band like the Beatles that was in the limelight of pop music, like that everyone listened to, that was super popular, and they were so crazy, they did so many crazy things, I don't think we're ever going to get that again. All right. Good. Guys, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. I will switch over to my last screen and reposition my head here. There we go. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, you might also want to check out one of my free downloads. Just go to holisticsongwriting.com. with or without a dash, doesn't really matter, and go to the products page. You can find some free stuff on there, which is really cool, like free song titles, free arrangements, free, the lyric writing canvas, which is one of my most famous, most popular free tools that is helping a lot of people out there. So check that out. Runs like The Weeknd, Taylor Swift formula, all of that stuff you can find on my website. You can also check out down here, also on the website, in the product section, you can find one of my pro courses. And as I said, since it's Black Friday, they're all 30% off until the 30th, so the last day of this, or the second to last day of this month. Anyways, you should grab those before that deal is over. And then on the other side over here, it says subscribe and follow, meaning just follow me on YouTube, obviously, subscribe here. Follow on Facebook and on Twitter, especially on Facebook, because on Facebook I'm posting a lot of updates to the board game and also the book, which I haven't really talked about this Q&A. Just a quick update on the Addiction Engine. It's going really well. I'm writing like a maniac, basically. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm not sure when it's going to release, but it's way too early to tell for that. But yeah, you'll know about it when I'm close to that. Anyways, thanks for sticking around and listening to this whole thing. I really highly appreciate it. Take care and talk to you soon.